You are not broke because you spend too much. And you might just end up poor in life experiences, not because you didn't save, but because the system you trust was never designed for you to truly win. Think about that for a second. What if the golden rule of retirement, the very mathematical foundation that millions of Americans rely on just to survive, is structurally rigged to force you into an unlived life? Welcome to USA Rift. If you want to understand how the financial system really operates behind closed doors, subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and comment below on what you thought. And hey, if you really want to support our deep dives, consider becoming a channel member. Today, we're exposing the uncomfortable truth about financial certainty and the invisible psychological prison it creates for almost everyone.
4%. It's literally etched into the minds of every single investor, every saver, every worker dreaming of the day they can finally step away from the grind. This famous rule was created back in 1994 by a financial planner named William Bengen. And the premise? It was intoxicatingly simple. If you have $1 million, you can withdraw 4%, that's $40,000, in your very first year of retirement. From there, you simply adjust that exact number upward every single year to match inflation. According to the original research, your money would survive even the absolute worst 30-year historical market conditions. Sounds perfect, right? But you really have to remember what 1994 actually looked like. Interest rates were dramatically higher. You could easily, and I mean easily, find risk-free government bonds yielding well over 5, sometimes even 7%. The stock market operated under entirely different global conditions back then. The math was incredibly easy when the baseline yield of the economy practically handed you your 4% on a silver platter. But you have to ask yourself, does this rigid, decades-old math still hold up in today's radically shifted, highly volatile economy?
Part 1. The flawed golden rule.
Okay, let's dive into this because the answer to that question is honestly far darker than the financial industry wants to admit. Right now, the major institutions are quietly walking back their promises. William Bengen's original model assumed a rigid 30-year horizon and fixed inflation-adjusted spending, regardless of what was actually happening in the world. It basically assumed you would blindly pull money from your accounts, whether the market was soaring to all-time highs or crashing into the ground. It expected you to act like an emotionless machine. But look at where we are now. Major financial institutions, like Morningstar in their latest State of Retirement Income Report, have recently projected the safe withdrawal rate down to 3.9% for a balanced portfolio in 2026. Why? Because we're living in an era of highly elevated equity valuations, totally unpredictable inflation, and completely shifting bond yields. The math is literally cracking under the pressure of modern reality. Now, you might be thinking, a mere fraction of a percentage point, dropping from 4 to 3.9, that sounds trivial. But on $1 million portfolio, that is $1,000 in purchasing power vanished in year one alone. And because of compounding inflation, it equates to tens of thousands of dollars stripped right out of your life over a 30-year span. What does that drop actually mean for a real retiree? It means deciding between paying skyrocketing property taxes and fixing a necessary home repair. The traditional 4% rule is not bulletproof. In fact, under modern conditions, it is deeply, deeply fragile.
Part 2. Sequence of returns and the hidden trap. To really understand why this rigid rule fails real people, we have to introduce the true hidden villain of our financial story. It's a structural trap that most people never see coming until it is far too late to escape. The danger isn't just a stock market crash. The danger is market timing, the exact moment that crash happens in your life. In the industry, they call it sequence of returns risk. If you experience a major market downturn in the first few years of your retirement, your portfolio can be permanently mutilated. Think of it as reverse dollar cost averaging. Look, when you're accumulating wealth during your working years, market drops are actually great, right? You're buying stocks on sale. But when you are withdrawing to pay your bills, a down market forces you to sell far more shares just to generate that same baseline income. Paint a picture in your mind of a retiree in the year 2000. They step away from their desk, ready to finally live their dream. And then the dot-com bubble bursts. To keep the lights on, to pay for groceries and medical bills, they are forced to liquidate massive chunks of their life savings at absolute rock-bottom prices. And here is the kicker. Once those shares are sold at depressed prices, they are gone forever. They can never ever participate in the market recovery that inevitably follows. A crash in 1937 or the year 2000 didn't just cause a temporary dip on a spreadsheet, it absolutely annihilated the capital base of millions of Americans. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer terror of this mathematical trap. We have two investors, the exact same starting balance of $1 million, the exact same lifelong market average return over 30 years. Literally, the only difference is the sequence of those returns. Investor A gets a pretty standard 6% gain early on. Their wealth compounds in those critical first few years, and their money easily lasts 40 years. No stress. But investor B, they suffer a 15% drop in years 1 and 2. They are forced into high share liquidation at the exact wrong time. Because of those early losses, Investor B begins a slow, agonizing descent into poverty. Their portfolio is entirely depleted in 25 years. Think about what that actually means in the real world. You are in your late 80s, you are vulnerable, and the bank account simply runs dry. Exact same returns, exact same rigid withdrawal strategy, but one dies with generational wealth and the other goes completely bankrupt. Part 3. The cost of absolute safety. Now when people realize they could easily be Investor B, pure panic sets in. And the financial industry's answer to this panic is exactly what leads us to the tragedy of our story. To protect against that worst-case scenario, that absolute nightmare sequence of returns, people are told to adopt ultra-conservative withdrawal rates. They drop from 4% down to 3.5% or even a suffocating 3%. They are trying to buy absolute safety, but that safety comes with a massive, invisible price tag. The result is a profound inefficiency in how you live your life. Stanford University research exposes this directly. By plotting expected utility, which is essentially the actual human benefit, against the cost of different retirement strategies, the research proves that the traditional 4% rule forces investors to massively overpay for their spending. To survive the absolute worst historical markets, you are forced to hoard cash like a doomsday prepper. The result? You waste 10 to 20% of your initial wealth on unspent surpluses. You are paying a massive premium just to insure against an economic disaster that, statistically speaking, probably won't even happen during your lifetime. Let me put this into perspective, because the Stanford study revealed something absolutely mind-blowing about the psychology of money. If an investor truly wanted a 0% chance of failure, if they were entirely intolerant of any risk whatsoever, a guaranteed risk-free bond strategy would cost only $44.80 for every $100 required by the rigid 4% rule. Think about that. The traditional rule is essentially charging you more than double for the exact same peace of mind. Why? Because the system is designed to keep your wealth under management. The financial industry profits immensely off this inefficiency while your wealth remains trapped in a vault. You are leaving massive amounts of your capital inefficient, unused, and completely paralyzed by fear. Part 4. The unlived life. This brings us to the profound human consequence of this financial paranoia, because the numbers on a spreadsheet translate directly into the reality of your daily existence. When you obsess over sequence of returns risk, when you lower your spending to an ultra-conservative 3% just to feel safe, what are you actually sacrificing? The data here is honestly shocking. If you adopt the safest 3% withdrawal rate, simulations show that you will typically leave behind 4 times your initial wealth at death. Let that sink in for a moment. If you retire with $1 million, you spend 30 years living like you are poor, agonizing over every single receipt, only to die with $4 million sitting uselessly in the bank. That is a massive bequest to your heirs, or even worse, to the government. But more importantly, it is money that could have funded global travel. It could have funded critical health treatments to extend your mobility. It could have paid for your grandchildren's college educations while you were still alive to actually see them graduate. It represents irreplaceable family memories that simply never happened. You traded your actual life for a mathematical surplus. This fear of the worst-case scenario has created a tragic nationwide phenomenon of mass underspending. Retirees are so terrified of becoming a statistical failure that they artificially constrain their own existence. They skip the vacations, they don't buy the beach house, they penny pinch in their healthiest, most active years, all to protect a stockpile of wealth that they will eventually be too old and too frail to ever actually enjoy. This is an illusion of necessary scarcity. Society has completely conditioned older Americans to act broke even when they are literal multimillionaires. We are taught that drawing down the principal is somehow a moral failure rather than the exact purpose for which the money was saved in the first place. The system has robbed them of their hard-earned golden years by weaponizing their own sense of caution against them.
Part 5. The Modern Retirement Playbook. But listen, you do not have to fall into this trap. The wealthy and the well-informed do not use rigid, fearful rules from 1994. It is time to pull back the curtain on the dynamic, modern strategies used today to beat this broken system and reclaim the wealth that is rightfully yours. The first structural fix is called the dynamic guardrails approach. Instead of acting like a robot, blindly withdrawing the exact same amount every year, you act like a human responding to the economy. Because humans are adaptable, right? You can actually start with a slightly higher initial withdrawal rate. The secret here is flexibility. Financial researchers have found that simply agreeing to skip your annual inflation raise during a year of negative market returns increases your portfolio's survival rate 5 times more effectively and slashing your spending by 20% later on. Think about how emotionally freeing that is. In tough markets, you tighten the belt slightly. Maybe you just skip one big trip. In strong markets, you literally give yourself a raise. It's an emotionally smoothing strategy that drastically increases your financial success without locking you into a lifetime of paranoid penny pinching.
Let's move on and see how this builds, because the ultimate defense against sequence of returns risk, the strategy that truly severs the link between market panic and your daily survival, is the 3-bucket strategy. Bucket 1 holds 1 to 2 years of your essential living expenses in absolute cash. It doesn't earn much, but it never ever loses value. Bucket 2 holds medium-term bonds to fund the next decade of your life, and Bucket 3 holds your long-term growth equities. Imagine the psychology of this setup for a second. You wake up during a massive global recession. You turn on the TV, and the news anchors are screaming that the stock market is down 20%. And you know what? You simply don't care. You don't panic. You don't sell a single stock. You simply live out of Bucket 1's cash reserves, giving your stock portfolio the 2 years it needs to naturally recover. You have built an impenetrable wall between Wall Street's chaos and your kitchen table.
Furthermore, modern planning shifts the entire focus away from relying purely on portfolio withdrawals and moves toward building a guaranteed income floor. Let me explain. If you delay taking Social Security until age 70, you secure an 8% annual mathematical boost to your permanent, inflation-adjusted benefit for every single year you wait past your full retirement age. That is an absolutely unbeatable government-backed return. By combining maximized Social Security with other guaranteed income sources like fixed annuities or pensions, you aim to cover 100% of your essential baseline living expenses. Once your basic survival, your housing, your food, your healthcare is entirely guaranteed by this floor, the pressure on your investment portfolio drops to zero. You are completely uncoupled from the stock market. Your remaining wealth is no longer your life support system. It literally becomes your permission slip to actually live.
And that leaves us with this final, profound reality. The true cost of conservatism is the unlived life represented by the unspent surplus. I want you to really think about that. If your money is just a stockpile sitting on a screen that you are too terrified to ever touch, then who does that wealth actually serve? Is your capital a tool designed to give you freedom, experiences, and joy? Or has it become a psychological prison built entirely out of mathematical fear? The system wants you cautious. The math wants you fearful. Most people will spend their entire lives guarding a surplus they will never, ever get to enjoy. But the choice of how you actually live, well, that is entirely up to you. And the worst part, most people will never realize it until it's too late. Thank you for watching USA Rift. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and drop a comment below on what you thought. We will see you in the next one.